Hello, and welcome to the 36th lesson in Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. This is the 5th lesson in rule number 5. Don't let your children do something that will make you not like them. And this is Lessons Online. So, we're going to begin a new section today. It begins with the question, are we parents or friends? So, parent or friend. Let us read. The neglect and mistreatment that is part and parcel of poorly structured or even entirely absent disciplinary approaches can be deliberate, motivated by explicit, conscious, if misguided, parental motives. But more often than not, modern parents are simply paralyzed by fear that they will no longer be liked or even loved by their children if they chastise them for any reason. They want their children's friendship above all and are willing to sacrifice respect to get it. This is not good. A child will have many friends, but only 2 parents, if that, and parents are more, not less, than friends. Friends have very limited authority to correct. Every parent, therefore, needs to learn to tolerate the momentary anger or even hatred directed toward them by their children after necessary corrective action has been taken, as the capacity of children to perceive or care about long-term consequences is very limited. Parents are the arbiters of society. They teach children how to behave so that other people will be able to interact meaningfully and productively with them. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. And remember, hold on. All right. Last week we talked about finding the topic sentence and trying to understand the big message by understanding the structure of paragraphs. We have a main idea and several supporting details. So I will look for that in this lesson as well. So the first organizing theme is parent or friend. This whole section will be comparing the role of parents as parent versus friend. We should keep that in mind the whole time. Now we are in the first paragraph, so let's read. The neglect and mistreatment that is part and parcel of poorly structured or entirely absent disciplinary approaches. Okay, part and parcel. This is an idiom that means it is associated with, and in fact, it is the main component of. So, neglect and mistreatment are associated with absent disciplinary approaches. They are also the main result, the main characteristic of absent disciplinary approaches or poorly structured ones. Okay, so poorly structured disciplinary approaches or absent disciplinary approaches. So no discipline at all or discipline which is done poorly creates neglect and mistreatment. Now, the neglect and mistreatment is the subject of the sentence. So, the neglect and mistreatment can be deliberate. So he is saying that parents are deliberately neglecting and mistreating their children in some cases. That means they are doing it with full knowledge. And in that case, it would be motivated by explicit, conscious parental motives. So the parents are doing this on purpose. If misguided, this suggests this construction. This is explicit, conscious if misguided. Conscious if misguided. The use of if here, this is a construction. It means that the action is conscious, for sure. It's conscious for sure. It may be misguided as well as conscious. It is definitely intentional. It may be misguided. Well, actually, I think I've maybe better erase that. It doesn't really mean what I just said. It has a different implication. It means that when this motivation is conscious, it is misguided. So it's intentional, but it is wrong. They are making a mistake. So if is used to indicate that this thing that came before has this characteristic which you wouldn't expect. So it's a contrary characteristic. So if I say, I'm definitely going to do this, I'm intending to do this, you can say, well, your intention, although misguided, is strong. Although misguided means it's definitely misguided. I think the if means it may or may not be misguided. This is one of those idioms that is sort of, we native speakers use it, but I've never seen it explained. So anyway, in this case, I know he is saying that this abuse and neglect is intentional, but it is also misguided. More often than not, so that basically means often, modern parents are simply paralyzed by the fear they will no longer be liked or loved by their children if they chastise them. Okay. I want to erase all of this. More often than not, modern parents are simply paralyzed. Okay. First, he is saying the abuse and neglect may be intentional, but often it is not intentional. It's just that the parents are paralyzed by fear. So, to simplify the sentence, sometimes parents withhold discipline, they have no discipline, because they have a strategy, a parenting strategy that is well thought out and intentional, but misguided. So that would be people who have read books on positive parenting and child-centered parenting. Those people are withholding correction intentionally, although it's not a good idea. So that's some people. But many are not following a plan. They are just afraid. Afraid their children will not like them if they discipline them. Okay, that's the idea. Some are doing it on purpose, withholding discipline. Others are just afraid that their children won't like them. Those parents, they want their children's friendship above all. So that means the thing they want the most is the children's friendship. It is not the children to grow up to be good people. It is for the children to love me. The highest value is that the children will love the parent. And they are willing to sacrifice respect to get it. It is the friendship of their children. They're going to sacrifice respect. So they want their children's friendship. If the children don't respect them, that's okay. As long as they like me, I'm fine. This is not good. A child will have many friends, but only two parents, if that. This phrase, if that, means many children will not even have two parents or even one. It is saying, best case scenario, two parents. But many have only one or none. So, if that. I could use that phrase in another sentence. If you become a dishwasher, that is a low job in America, you'll make minimum wage. If that, that means you may make less than minimum wage. Okay. A child will have many friends, but only two parents, if that. And parents are more, not less, than friends. So a parent is more valuable than a friend. You have many friends. You only have two chances on parent. Your father, your mother, and you may lose them. And these are valuable. They're better. Friends have very limited authority to correct. That means they can, excuse me, they don't have authority over you to correct your bad behavior. Very limited authority means not much authority at all. Every parent, therefore, needs to learn to tolerate the momentary anger or even hatred directed towards them by their children after necessary corrective action has been taken. This sentence is too long. I'm going to go little by little. Every parent, therefore, why? Because we have only two parents and parents are better than friends. Because friends can't correct you. Therefore, every parent needs to learn to tolerate the momentary anger or hatred directed toward them by their children. Tolerate means you do not react. You can absorb that short-term, momentary anger or hatred. You must be able to absorb that. Directed towards them by their children after necessary corrective action has been taken. So the children are angry at you or hate you after you have spanked them. And it is necessary corrective action. He is not saying be mean to your kids all the time. He is saying if you must correct your child because your child is doing something wrong, then they may become angry and you must tolerate it. So, after necessary corrective action has been taken, as, or you could use the word since or because, the capacity of children to perceive or care about long-term consequences is very limited. Here we have this limited thing again. We had limited up here as well. Limited means it's not very much. Okay, so here the thing which is not very much is children's ability to care about long-term consequences. Children do not care about long-term consequences, consequences which will benefit them in the future a long way. So a child does not value correction. A child does not receive correction and say, thank you, mommy, because now I will be able to be a successful adult. No. A child will react with anger. I hate you! Because the child doesn't see that in the long term, the correction is good. All right? They have a limited ability to perceive long-term consequences. So they have a short-term mentality and they are angry. Parents are the arbiters of society. They're the gatekeepers. They're the people who stand in control of the future of your society in their children. They, meaning parents, teach children how to behave so that other people will be able to interact meaningfully and productively with them. So parents teach children the rules of society so that the children can have commerce interpersonally and in every way with ordinary members of society. So let's just think what the topic sentence may have been for this. Neglect and mistreatment that is part and parcel of poorly structured disciplinary approaches can be deliberate, but more often they're paralyzed by fear that they will no longer be liked if they chastise them. I would say that whole thing is the topic. So we'll make it orange. How about that? So I would say the whole thing is the topic. I'm having a lot of trouble with the iPad today, and it's because it did a software update and things are working differently and not as well as far as I'm concerned. It keeps popping this up when I only go near it. Okay, next paragraph. It is an active responsibility to discipline a child. That is definitely going to be the topic sentence. How much you want to bet? I bet that's the topic sentence. It is an active responsibility to discipline a child. Okay? I'm going to go to this. And then this. And then this. It is not anger at misbehavior. So, active responsibility, not anger. In other words, you don't discipline just because you're angry, and you should not do it because of that reason. It is not revenge for misdeed. It is, instead, a careful combination of mercy and long-term judgment. Proper discipline requires effort, so it's not easy. Indeed, it is virtually synonymous with effort. It is difficult to pay careful attention to children. It is difficult to figure out what is wrong and what is right and why. It is difficult to formulate just and compassionate strategies of discipline and to negotiate their application with others deeply involved in a child's care, like your husband. Because of this combination of responsibility and difficulty, any suggestion that all constraints placed on children are damaging can be perversely welcome. That means if someone tells you that that very hard thing you feel you have to do is bad and you don't have to do it, you'll say, "Yay!" It's perversely welcome. Perversely means not for the right reasons. So, the idea that you should not do it because it's damaging is welcome because it's so difficult and to do in the first place that you would be glad not to have to. Okay, let me. Okay, it's perversely welcome. Such a notion once accepted, allows adults who should know better to abandon their duty to serve as agents of enculturation and pretend that doing so is good for children. It's a deep and pernicious act of self-deception. It's lazy, cruel, and inexcusable. And our proclivity to rationalize does not end there. Okay, so this thing is driving me crazy. It's an act of responsibility to discipline a child, not anger, revenge, or revenge. It is a careful combination of mercy and long-term judgment to figure out how to be a good parent. Proper discipline requires effort. It is difficult to do. Difficult for many reasons. Because of the combination of responsibility and difficulty, people are glad to believe that they don't have to do it. However, that belief is self-deception at its worst. Okay, that's the summary of that. And our proclivity means tendency to rationalize. Rationalize means look at our bad behavior and figure out why it's actually okay. Our proclivity, our ability to do that, to rationalize, does not end there. So we know the next paragraph will be more rationalizations, more reasons to believe that you should not discipline your children, when really you just don't want to believe it, because it's so hard to take that responsibility. Let's read the next paragraph. We assume that rules will irremediably inhibit what would otherwise be the boundless and intrinsic creativity of our children, even though the scientific literature clearly indicates, first, that creativity beyond the trivial is shockingly rare, and second, that strict limitations facilitate rather than inhibit creative achievement. Belief in the purely destructive element of rules and structure is frequently conjoined with the idea that children will make good choices about when to sleep, what to eat, if their perfect natures are merely allowed to manifest themselves. These are equally ungrounded assumptions. I'm going to underline this because this is important to the understanding of this paragraph. Children are perfectly capable of attempting to subsist on hot dogs, chicken fingers, and Fruit Loops, if doing so will attract attention, provide power, or shield them from trying anything new. Instead of going to bed wisely and peacefully, children will fight nighttime unconsciousness until they are staggered by fatigue. They are also perfectly willing to provoke adults while exploring the complex contours of the social environment, just like juvenile chimps, harassing the adults and their troops. Observing the consequences of teasing and taunting enables chimp and child alike to discover the limits of what might otherwise be a too structured and terrifying freedom. Such limits, when discovered, provide security, even if their detection causes momentary disappointment or frustration. Okay, let's look at this paragraph. First, I want to remind you that when it says there are equally ungrounded assumptions, it's pointing out that there are two assumptions. Let's find them. Okay, we assume that rules will irremediably inhibit what would otherwise be the boundless and intrinsic creativity of our children. Okay, so here's one of them. We assume that rules will inhibit the creativity of our children. That is one of the ungrounded assumptions. Rules will dampen creativity. That rules will quench creativity, like pouring water over a lit candle. Psst, it's gone. So that's the first assumption. Structure limits creativity. Okay, belief in the purely destructive element of rules, that's this one, rules and structure, is frequently conjoined with, so brought together with, let's give it another color. How about purple? Conjoined with the idea that children will make good choices. That's our second ungrounded assumption. So, rules and structure will limit creativity, and children can decide things for themselves and make good choices. These are the two ungrounded assumptions that people are making, and pointing out also that scientific literature clearly disproves the first one. Clearly says that strict limitations facilitate creative achievement. So let me give you an example. If someone wants to be an amazing creative pianist, is it a good idea to give them piano lessons when they are a child so they can learn the different keys and the different scales and the different intervals? Those who practice the most achieve the most. The structure facilitates creativity. It is the same in all areas. Structure trains you so that you can do your best. So the scientific literature clearly indicates, number one, creativity is rare. Not many Mozarts are born in a given generation, and strict limitations facilitate it rather than inhibit it. And then here we have the idea good choices for children, and all of the support for this one is down here. They want to subsist on hot dogs. They don't want to go to bed wisely. They fight nighttime consciousness. This is supposed to be purple. They fight nighttime consciousness. They want to eat junk food. And they want to provoke adults. That means irritate them until the adult shows them where the boundary is. In other words, children want structure. Okay. So it enables the child to discover the limits. This is driving me crazy. Here we go. All right. Enables the chimp and child alike to discover the limits of what might be a too unstructured and terrifying freedom. So the main idea in this paragraph is this. We have two ungrounded assumptions. One, that structure is bad for creativity. The other, that children make good choices. That's the whole paragraph. Okay, here's another paragraph. I remember taking my daughter to the playground. I have a hunch this will be more support of the previous ideas. Another example to prove his previous points, mainly because the transition is, I remember something. Usually that is an anecdote of support for a previous main idea. But let's read. I remember taking my daughter to the playground once when she was about 2. She was playing on the monkey bars hanging in midair. A particularly provocative little monster of about the same age was standing above her on the same bar she was gripping. I watched him move toward her. Our eyes locked. He slowly and deliberately stepped on her hands with increasing force over and over as he stared me down. He knew exactly what he was doing. Up yours, Daddy-O, That was his philosophy. He had already concluded that adults were contemptible and that he could safely defy them. Too bad, then, that he was destined to become one. That was the most hopeless future his parents had saddled him with. To his great and salutary shock, I picked him bodily off the playground structure and threw him 30 feet down the field. No, I didn't. I just took my daughter somewhere else. But it would have been better for him if I had. Okay. This is definitely another paragraph in support of his previous idea. So let's look at it. So I remember, meaning it's from his past, taking my daughter to the playground once when she was 2. She was playing on the monkey bars, that's the things children climb on, hanging in midair. So she's hanging from her hands like this. A particularly provocative little monster. Okay, remember in the previous paragraph he said that chimps provoke adults and that human children provoke adults in order to find out what the limits are. This child was particularly provocative. Little monster, we call children little monsters. Of about the same age as his daughter, was standing above her on the monkey bar. So he had been climbing on them and was now walking on the one she was hanging from. I watched him move toward her. Our eyes locked. So he is looking at me, I am looking at him. We see each other. He slowly and deliberately stepped on her hands. So this child knew that Jordan was the father of the little girl. And he walked over and stepped on her hands, knowing the father will want to protect his little girl, but yet the little boy did not fear Jordan, because the little boy had lived 2 years of his life doing anything he wanted, and his own father and mother never spanked him, never disciplined him. So he feels safe going over and stepping on the fingers of an enormous man who's standing right there. Okay, our eyes locked. He slowly and deliberately stepped on her hands with increasing force over and over as he stared me down. Stared me down means you're looking aggressively. He is looking aggressively. The first person to look away loses the battle. It's like a contest. To stare someone down, you win if they have to back down. This 2-year-old was stepping on the daughter's hands and saying, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" He was begging Jordan to retaliate. He knew exactly what he was doing. So you can't say, "Oh, he's just an innocent child. He didn't realize." No. Up yours, Daddy-O. That's like giving the finger to someone. But this is a polite way to write it. Up yours, Daddy-O. That was his philosophy. He had a general attitude of contempt for adults. He had already concluded that adults were contemptible and that he could safely defy them. He had already learned to have contempt for adults, meaning his parents first off, and all other adults, and that he could safely do anything he wanted because no adult would ever stop him. Too bad, then, that he was destined to become one, meaning he was destined to become an adult that he despised. This is going to be bad for his self-esteem someday. That was the hopeless future his parents had saddled him with. To saddle someone means to burden them. His parents had burdened him with the future of becoming something he had contempt for, an adult. And then Jordan plays with us a little bit. He says, to his great and salutary shock. So, to his shock would mean my action shocked the child. And great shock means a lot of shock. And salutary means good for you. A beneficial shock. A shock that wakes you up so that you can run out of a burning building. Salutary means good for you. Something that's beneficial. So, to the child's great and beneficial shock, I picked him bodily off the playground structure. So that would mean pick him up and throw him. Not just pick up his foot, not just give him a hand so he'll not push on her foot, but picked him up bodily, his whole body, and threw him. 30 feet down the field. That's a long way. It would injure him. Then, no, I didn't. This throwing him was in Jordan's mind, a fantasy, what every adult wants to do. It's the beginning. This reading begins, the rule is, never let your children do things which will make other people dislike them. This boy was doing something that made Jordan dislike him. Jordan wanted to pick him up and throw him. This is a good example of what not to let your children do. No, I didn't. I just, meaning I merely, took my daughter somewhere else. But it would have been better for him if I had. It would have been better for the boy. It would have been salutary. It's sad for that child that he is not being corrected and shown limits. Imagine a toddler, next paragraph, repeatedly striking his mother in the face. Why would he do such a thing? It's a stupid question. It's unacceptably naive. The answer is obvious. To dominate his mother. That's the reason. To see if he can get away with it. Violence, after all, is no mystery. It's peace that's the mystery. Violence is the default. It's easy. It's peace that is difficult. Learned, inculcated, earned. People often get basic psychological questions backwards. Why do people take drugs? Not a mystery. It's why they don't take them all the time. That's the mystery. Why do people suffer? Why do people suffer from anxiety? That's not a mystery. How is it that people can ever be calm? There's the mystery. We're breakable and mortal. A million things can go wrong in a million ways. We should be terrified out of our skulls every second, but we're not. The same can be said for depression, laziness, and criminality. Okay, let's figure out what he's saying here, what the main idea is. We have a bunch of examples, and we need to figure out what the main point is. Okay, so we have a toddler repeatedly striking his mother. Why? Obviously, to dominate her. Violence is no mystery. It's peace that's the mystery. Violence is the default. I think that's the thesis right there. So let's make it bolder. Violence, after all, is no mystery. It's peace that is the mystery. Violence is the default. Violence is easy. It's peace that is difficult. So the idea is the good state of mankind is not natural. The bad state is what is natural. And this view of parenting that assumes a child is good from birth and that you will screw him up by trying to discipline him is exactly wrong. Because without discipline, the child will be bad. Discipline is the exception. Badness is the default. It's the common. Okay, so let me put this back. It's learned, inculcated, that means you have to install it in your child, and earned. Peace. Peace is expensive. Chaos is cheap. People often get basic psychological questions backwards. Here's examples. Why do people take drugs? No mystery. You would expect them to take them all the time. Why do people suffer from anxiety and depression? Not a mystery. They should always have anxiety. Why are they ever calm? Since we are breakable and mortal, we should be scared all the time. But we're not. Why? The same can be said for depression, laziness, and criminality. So maybe in the next paragraph, he will talk about these, not just peace, but depression, laziness, and criminality, showing that children are born with propensity toward all of these bad things. And we must train them to enable them to achieve the opposite virtue. I'm not sure, but my guess is that's where he will go with this. Okay, let's go ahead and stop here and pick it up again next week. Have a great week.